Susie Choi, thank you for joining us.
Willy Russo, thanks for having me.
If you were to take your art on a date, where would you take it?
It'd have to be something really fun.
Okay.
Nothing too schmancy.
I love it.
I reckon something like Luna Park.
Roller coasters?
Yeah, roller coasters,
Yes.
Coney Island with the giant slides.
You think your art would really love that?
I think so, not having to think too much, a bit of escapism. I think we'd have fun.
Nice. When did you first notice your art?
It kind of snuck up on me.
Okay.
It wasn't sort of that common story of finding solace in art when you're a kid. So it was actually a few years ago when I was organising a birthday party for my youngest. And I'm not a sort of planner or organiser, but we decided to make the theme based on the Studio Ghibli movie My Neighbor Totoro. It's like an animated Japanese film and it's so beautiful. Anyway, so I decided to make one of these cardboard cutout kind of face images, and I found myself at the art store like buying the largest piece of foam board I could get and paints, and because I'd never really painted before, but something was propelling me to do this. I'm like, I'm going to make this big painting and the kids are going to put their faces through it, and so I just kind of gave it a go. And the general response was, oh, I didn't know you could paint.
This is really good, Susie.
Yeah. Well, some of the legs are a little bit elongated, but generally it was recognisable. And I mixed the colours and I really enjoyed that. And I was like, I didn't know I could paint either. But on some level, I guess I must have known, like, I don't know. I just gave it a try. That actually I was too thick to even fully notice then that that's what I wanted to do. Because a couple months passed and then I was like, oh, that was a really enjoyable thing. And maybe I want to do some more of that. That's when I started like consuming, podcasts and going to free things at the art gallery, because I didn't really grow up with any kind of connection to art.
Yeah.
So that's, and then
how long was it between that and studying at NAS?
Oh, it was pretty quick actually.
Okay.
So I probably started at NAS the year after that, or a couple of years after that. Because I sort of got really into the Talking with Painters podcast.
Isn't Maria great?
Amazing. And I was just like, these are my people, and it's local, so everything felt relatable. And then, on talking, I think it was Michael Sims who had said, oh, I took this class at Julian Ashton with Rod Wong. And I'm like, oh, Rod Wong, Julian Ashton. And I signed up for a couple terms, and that was amazing. Like, it kind of blew my mind. And then I was like, I want to branch out into 3D. And so you hear a lot about National Art School. So I checked out the open day, and it just felt like I needed to be there. And even then, there were so many reasons not to do it.
Okay.
Young family, and I was working as a speech pathologist. Like, where did this art thing come from? But I just knew I had to do it, even if I had all these reasons not to. So I just signed up, and it was the best thing ever. And
from that point, was it a slow burn, or was it pretty hot and fast?
Very hot and fast for the longest. It hasn't been that long, but for the most part, just voraciously consuming anything art related I could.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like I was so ready to catch up on all of these things that really just made sense to me, but I'd never formally learnt. So it was really just constant, and I was so obsessed with just learning all aspects of it, and art history blew my mind. That was amazing. And then studio time and just being among friends and lecturers who, you know, were after the same thing was just incredible. I'd never had that in my life before.
They were your people.
Totally.
Around something that was so important to you.
Yes, and something that I didn't know I was missing. So, and then I guess just recently I've really thought a bit more about, you know, the long game, you know, wanting to have because this is what I want to do, so thinking about a sustainable practice. So then, yeah, it's a little bit, it's not so like intense, it's more like, okay, you know,
flattening out of the rhythm.
Yeah.
Rather than kind of spurts of like intensity,
Yes.
nothing, and then intensity.
Yeah.
How did you know you had committed to your practice?
You know, it's funny, like, I don't know if there was a specific time that I knew. It was, I guess it's been kind of a drive that wasn't me thinking. It was just like a gut thing. Yeah. So it's probably like being at NAS. I mean, I knew at the open day, talking to people, that I had to be there. And then just making friends there, and those little glimmers of, you know, being a student is quite a different thing than being a practicing artist, but there are those moments in the sort of degree where you're able to get into the flow, and it's those moments where you're like, this is the thing, this is the feeling.
This is really living.
Yeah, and this is my sort of true thing. Yeah.
Was there anything you had to give up in committing to an art practice or your art practice?
I guess I don't think of it that way, because it's such a privilege to make art. But you do, I mean, practically speaking, you know, there's only so many days in the week and weeks in the month, and so you do have to really prioritize studio time, which is like the most precious time. So yeah, maybe like you can't go to every coffee date and every like school event, or those
Being
sorts of
prioritizing and being quite disciplined with those priorities.
Definitely. And you know, it doesn't feel like I'm giving it up, because I really want that studio time. Like, that's what I want to be doing. So
well, that's a great indicator that it's right.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely. I think it sounds really cheesy, but I remember, well, when she said it, it wasn't cheesy, but I saw this interview with Marina Abramovich, and she was saying, you know, you're an artist when making art is like breathing for you. You know, you kind of have to do it. There's no not doing it. And I kind of feel like, yeah, I mean, that's a real gift to actually feel that way. Yeah. Even though if life is busy and you can't get to it, then that can be really challenging. Sort of, yeah, but no, yeah.
What's the craziest thing you've done for your art?
Kind of feels like the whole journey has been so fast and crazy. Like, and you know, in retrospect, there were indicators, like growing up, and yeah. But I think the craziest thing was, it just sounds like I'm super not self-aware, but I did find myself like just ripping up the carpet in what was, you know, the nursery, and just putting the kids in a room together, and I'm just like, this is my studio, and just like turning it, you know, like it seemed to come out of nowhere.
Unconscious, like
oh,
you were
fully
just in there ripping up carpet.
Yeah.
Training studio, and then like woke up from a daze and was like.
Yes, it really was like that. And it's probably because I can get super in my head if I think about things too much, but this was like I had no choice in the matter. So it did feel crazy, you know, but I was like, this room has the best light. I'm gonna turn, it was just like, you know, one day it was a nursery and the next day it was just a mess with my paints and
Amazing.
Yeah.
Have you ever cheated on your art?
I don't think it's possible because everything is about the art. Like everything connects, you know, everything in your life informs the art. And I guess the art probably informs everything in your life too. It's kind of like one and the same. Anything that even seems like you're going down a kind of different path, it all kind of connects back.
Have you ever fallen out of love with your art?
No way. I mean, maybe it's that whole sort of 3 decades of not having that and finding it. There's just like, it just feels like a real gift.
It's like your home.
Yeah. It's a great space and privilege, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
If you're feeling a little disconnected from your art, what do you do to kind of get back in touch with it or woo it back into vibe?
I feel like I do a lot of work outside of the studio to sort of make sure I'm in the right headspace when I am in the studio.
What kind of stuff?
Research. Sort of, you got to keep that intellectual side of sort of your practice fed. So reading, I love watching other creatives talk about their process. So I'm always on YouTube looking for I watch filmmakers and writers talking about process, and it's amazing how much is common among all kinds of different creative people and different kinds of artists, musicians, all of it. And likewise, if you're able to have conversations with your artist friends, just 10-minute chat on the phone can just invigorate, give you a bit of clarity on, what you're doing or where to go when you're feeling a little bit confused.
Yep.
But also just getting in the right frame of mind sort of before you're in the studio, because that time is limited. So, I can have a tendency to be a bit anxious, and I think that's what kind of made me so oblivious to all of these kind of signs when I was growing up that art might have been a thing, is just anxiety can kind of cloud everything. So just making sure that, there's no space for anxiety in the studio, and that's easier said than done, but just trying to be mindful and get out of your head. Get out of your head. Yeah. Which for me is really important. I don't think that probably applies to every kind of practice, but for me definitely I've got to be able to have room for, intuition and instinct rather than me kind of trying too hard. Exactly.
I know, oh my God.
Just let it emerge.
Yes.
Which is...
Do you have a ritual or something that helps you kind of get back in?
One thing that I find really helpful, and it sounds kind of basic, but for me is really useful, is I literally slow down my movements, because when I do get anxious or worried, I start to get frazzled, and I notice that my body is just moving, I don't know, maybe without intention, or you're getting in that fight or flight mode. So I literally will just half tempo everything, my footsteps, I just have to force myself to walk at half pace, and then I guess your body just kind of relaxes, and then you're freer to listen. And I think that's the best thing for my practice anyway, is to listen to the material or listen to whatever ideas want to come out. Rather than me imposing some something that may be driven by my ego or some idea I had that's contrived and just not as interesting.
One last question. What's your top tip for keeping the passion alive in the studio?
Yeah, I guess all those things like keeping yourself fueled up in terms of the research side, the mindfulness. I think it's really important not to value judge your work. If you feel kind of driven to have something appear into the world, I think that is usually the most, useful thing to follow. Because if you start analysing that, it just sounds trite. Like if, for example, if you're like, I just want to make, my body wants to make spheres in a range of colours, it sounds not very meaningful.
It's so beautiful though.
It just sounds like, why? And what would that even look like, mean? What's the point? But when it comes out into the world, I don't know, there's a reason for why. And there's that magic of art being able to embed these stories into the material. And I think if you just stop all the time and pass judgment, like a value judgment, is this good enough, in the middle of something you clearly really want to do, that will kill spark for sure. Like, because you won't get to that point where you've created this thing that your body has told you to do, and then you're like, wow, this is a huge discovery for me. Like something that I thought I knew what it would be and that it would be lame, and then maybe it's actually become something more. And of course, there's going to be a million fails on the way to that, always, but that's okay. Like, that's disappointing, but I think that's important.
It's part of the process.
It's totally part of the process, especially, I think most of my fails are usually the ones that I go, oh no, that thing, that compulsion, that's lame, this would be cooler, and then that's a fail. Yeah. Whereas that thing that, has been like bothering me in the back of my mind for weeks, months, years, and I go, okay, well, let's see, this isn't leaving me alone, and that usually becomes something more than I could have guessed. Yeah.
Susie Choi, thank you so much for joining us on Two Red Chairs.
Thank you for having me.